They say there was once a woman whose blood turned to honey, sweet on the tongue, but poisoned at the core. She danced in the choir by day and whispered curses in the dark. No one knew that behind her silent smile was a storm born not of madness, but of something far older. When the sacred pastor broke the covenant of purity, she did not cry. She did not scream. She simply vowed, "Let the gods be my witness. I will feed him the sweetness of his own sin." Before the rivers found their names, before the first drumbeat rose into the stars, there was a village wrapped in golden savanna where the wind still spoke the language of the spirits, and secrets did not die, they only waited. That village was called Mbira, a place where the Baobab trees leaned like old men listening to gossip, and the soil carried whispers from the bones buried beneath. Cattle bells chimed in the dusk, and the scent of roasted millet floated in the evening air. But on this night, the air tasted different. A young woman named Aduni walked barefoot through the center of the village, her head wrapped in blue cloth, her eyes 2 wells too deep for her age. She was the pastor's secretary and daughter of the late herbalist, Mama Osaye, who was burned beneath the Olumo tree for knowing too much. Aduni had a way of being invisible and yet unforgettable. The woman said she was too quiet. The men said she was too knowing. And the pastor said she was a vessel of grace. But that was before he touched her, before he lied. And when the truth came that he had left her broken and sick, his holy hands stained with betrayal, she did not go to the elders. She did not weep before the congregation. Instead, she went to the river. It was the river Ajalu, the one no child dared to touch, for they said it remembered every broken promise made beneath the moon. There, Aduni knelt on the black stone and called out with a voice she did not recognize. Mother of waters, spirit of wound and healing, if justice sleeps in this land, then let me be your sting. The river did not speak in words. It moved, it listened, and from its depths rose a hush, then a breeze, then silence. Behind her, an old woman in a red wrapper appeared, eyes milky with time, lips carved like ancient wood. "You call on justice?" she asked. "I call on reckoning," Aduni whispered. The woman nodded slowly and reached into her satchel, drawing out a gourd sealed with wax and string. "Then take this," she said. "Inside is the sweetness of your pain, but once it is tasted, there is no return." Aduni took it with steady hands. Her voice did not tremble. Her heart was no longer her own. When the crocodile swallows the moon, the river does not speak, but the spirits dance in its silence. And on that night, as the stars blinked like watching eyes, Aduni returned to the village with the gourd in her satchel and war in her heart. The pastor stood before the congregation, robed in white, his voice thundering like summer rain. "Holiness is not an option, it is a command." The crowd echoed, "Amen." But Aduni's lips did not move. She watched him from her place at the back, the man whose hands had once blessed her brow, then defiled her body, who wore the collar of God but walked with the belly of a serpent. That night, after prayers and praises and the last hallelujah, he called her into his study. The oil lamp flickered. The air smelt of dust, ink, and a faint sweetness, see, like spoiled honey. "Aduni, my daughter," he said, touching her shoulder, "I know I have sinned, but let us walk in forgiveness." She said nothing. Instead, she pulled out a small clay cup, poured from the gourd, and handed it to him. "Drink, Baba. It is from the river. It will cleanse you." He hesitated, sniffed it. "What is this?" "A mixture of healing roots," she said softly. "My mother's recipe." He drank, he smiled, he swallowed the lie, and Aduni turned and left without a sound. That night, the fire in the hearth would not burn straight. It twisted sideways like a snake caught mid-turn.
Aduni lay in a small mud hut, staring at the woven roof above, but her mind was far, walking through dreams that were not hers. In her sleep, the old woman from the river came again, this time riding a black hyena. Behind her came shadows, faces of women with broken mouths and burning eyes, their tongues speaking no words, but screaming all the same. "You've done what the living would not," the old woman said, "but there is a price for feeding pain to another soul." Aduni tried to speak, but her voice was gone. The old woman leaned close, eyes like wet charcoal. "Did you think vengeance is free, child? No, you have opened the door, and something ancient has smelled the blood." Aduni woke with a jolt, her throat dry, her chest heavy. Outside, the village dogs were howling, and from the pastor's house came the sound of coughing. Not a normal cough, but the deep, dry bark of something unraveling from within. Morning came, but the sun refused to warm Mbira that day. People whispered of the pastor's sudden illness, of how his skin had lost its glow, of how his eyes now stared past the living. Aduni stood before her late mother's grave and said only one thing: "I did not poison him, Mama. I only gave him my truth." And far above, a hawk circled thrice, then vanished into the clouds. When the night birds sing at noon, the elders say the veil between worlds has thinned. In Mbira, that veil was now torn. And though no drum was beaten, the ancestors had begun to stir. The pastor, once the lion of the pulpit, now lay beneath goat hide blankets, sweating through his prayers. His lips cracked with thirst. His voice, once thunder, was now a whisper floating like smoke. He told no one what haunted his sleep, but the children heard it. At night, from his heart came strange chants, voices that sounded too many for one man. The village healer, old Baba Isola, was summoned. He took one look and said, "His body is cursed, but not by herbs. This is not sickness, this is judgment." He offered roots, oils, incense, but the pastor spat them up like bile. "No medicine will work," he rasped. "The river woman walks in my bones." Meanwhile, Aduni moved like a shadow through the village. People began to fear her, not because they knew what she had done, but because the air around her felt too still, too watching. Elder women crossed themselves as she passed. Men lowered their voices when she fetched water. Even the goats avoided her path. At the river's edge, she sat every evening, her feet buried in the mud, her eyes staring into the ripples. "Have I become what I hated?" she asked the wind. But only the reeds whispered back. On the seventh night, since the drinking of the gourd, Mbira was visited. It began with the dog. They howled until their throats gave out. Then came the silence, thick and strange, as if sound itself had been swallowed. Then fireflies. Thousands. They descended upon the pastor's compound like sparks from the sky. Not yellow, but glowing red, like embers with wings. Children screamed, mothers prayed, and the pastor, now trembling on the floor, shouted, "Forgive me, Aduni, forgive me. May the gods eat my shame." But it was too late, because something had answered. The walls of his house began to weep, not water, but thick black honey. It oozed from the beams. It pulsed on the floor. It carried a scent, sweet, then rotten. From the shadows stepped the old woman from Aduni's dreams. Only this time, everyone saw her. She wore a robe of river moss and bones. Her face shimmered between youth and old age. She looked at Aduni, who had followed the fireflies to the scene. "Your truth has spoken, child," she said. "Now the land must decide." She turned to the crowd, to the trembling pastor, and raised her hand. The fireflies scattered like ash, and the pastor fell still, not dead, not breathing, just still, as though time itself had paused inside him. When the tortoise is caught between fire and flood, it does not run. It remembers. That night, after the pastor fell into silence, Mbira did not sleep. The elders gathered beneath the talking tree, the sacred Iroko, where judgments were once passed before the coming of holy books. Torches burned low. The night hummed like a held breath. The villagers sat in a circle, the air thick with fear and incense. Aduni stood in the center, not bowed, not defiant, just present, like the eye of a storm. Elder Fola, whose beard reached his chest, struck his staff against the earth. Child of Osai, he began, what spirit have you unleashed in our village? Aduni's voice came slow, steady, not like someone defending herself, but like someone stating truth carved in stone. I unleashed nothing, she said. I called on the river. It answered. A murmur spread. Someone whispered, witch. Another said, he defiled her and lied before the gods. But the oldest among them, blind Ajah, who had not spoken in 5 seasons, raised a hand. You all see the storm, she croaked, but none asked about the drought that came before it. Silence. Ajah turned her blind eyes toward Aduni. Did he force you? Aduni clenched her fists. No, she said, but he stood in the place of a father, a shepherd, and he used that trust to rot my spirit. I carry his secret in my blood. Another gasped. Some clutched their children. Some stayed at the ground. Then the air changed. The wind turned cold. The fire flickered blue. And once again, the woman of the river appeared, not as a dream, not as a ghost, but as a presence, ancient and full. She stood beside Aduni without sound, her robe dripping water that vanished before it touched the earth. This is not a trial of men, she said. This is the trial of the soul. She pointed to the pastor, still stiff and silent, now brought into the circle like a broken statue. His mouth cannot lie, she said. His heart will speak instead. She drew a circle around him with salt and ash, and then she sang, a sound older than language, like the morning of stars. And the pastor's body began to twitch. From his chest rose a shadow, shaped like him, but darker, hollow-eyed. He stepped forward into the firelight and looked at Aduni. I fed on her silence, the shadow confessed. I wore the robe of holiness, but my hands were wolves. The villagers gasped. Some wept, some cursed. But the old river woman turned to Aduni and asked, now that the truth walks among them, what do you desire? Aduni looked at the pastor's shade, not with hatred, but something deeper. Suffering is already his, she said. I want freedom from his weight, from his story. Let him carry himself. The river woman nodded, and the salt circle caught fire. When the last drum falls silent, only the truth keeps echoing. As the salt circle blazed around the pastor's frozen body, the villagers watched in stunned reverence. The fire did not burn flesh. It burned memory, regret, pride, lies passed off as sermons. The pastor's shadow screamed, but not with the sound of pain. It screamed with recognition, like a man waking too late from a dream he wrote himself. Then the fire collapsed in on itself, and the shadow vanished into the earth. The pastor's body fell forward, empty, not dead, but stripped. He would never again speak with the voice of authority, only with the eyes of guilt. He crawled on his knees to Aduni's feet, not to beg, but as if pulled by something older than shame. I buried my sin in your silence, he whispered, but it grew like poison roots. Aduni looked down at him. For a long breath, she said nothing. Then, I released myself, not because you deserve peace, but because I do. The old woman of the river stepped forward. She placed a single cowrie shell in Aduni's palm, white, smooth coal. Keep this, she said. It is not power, it is remembrance. She turned to the villagers. You watched it happen. You said nothing. You bowed your heads, thinking the robe made the man. The crowd lowered their eyes. You fed the beast by pretending not to see. Let that blindness end tonight. Then, like mist at dawn, the river woman was gone. No sound, no goodbye, only a faint scent of rain on stone. In the days that followed, Mbira changed. Not quickly, not easily, but change did come. The pastor remained, not as leader, but as caretaker of the graves. He spent his days tending to those who had no voice left. No one touched him, no one stoned him. That, they said, would have been too merciful. Aduni walked differently now, not lighter, but clearer. She opened her mother's old hut and began healing again. This time, not just with herbs, but with truth. Women came to her, and men who were ready to unlearn what they had been taught. She spoke not as victim, but as witness, and from her they learned the difference. One night, many seasons later, a little girl asked her name. Auntie Aduni, did you curse him? Aduni smiled softly, brushing the child's hair from her face. No, she said. I answered the curse with honesty. The wind rustled the grass. The baobab tree groaned, and in the distance, the river sang, low and ancient, because rivers do not forget, but they do forgive when the truth is carried home. A child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth.